Every parent knows the bedtime routine, bath time, pajamas, then that magical moment when you whip out a colorful storybook filled with singing princesses, talking animals, and absolutely zero consequences. But what if I told you those bedtime stories you're reading to your kid? Yeah, originally designed to traumatize adults, fairy tales like Cinderella, Snow White, Little Red Riding Hood. Not fairy tales at all, more like medieval Netflix originals with a body count. These weren't heartwarming tales. They were true crime fan fiction with less romance and more cannibalism. And somewhere down the line, Disney said, let's cut the gore and add a talking raccoon. Behind every once upon a time is a real-life disaster, a documented murder, or a historical tragedy so brutal villagers had no choice but to turn it into a bedtime PSA. The talking wolves, serial killers, the wicked Steve mothers, actual poisoners, the sleeping princess. She wasn't napping, she was in a coma after a traumatic assault. You're about to discover that your favorite childhood stories had higher body counts than an episode of Law and Order SVU. The Brothers Grimm weren't just collectors of folklore. They were basically medieval crime podcasters documenting horror stories while wearing powdered wigs. True crime with castles, so tuck in, grab your blanket, and maybe lock your door. Because these fairy tales, they were never meant to make you feel safe. They were meant to keep you alive. 1. The Pied Piper, the mass disappearance nobody wants to talk about. It's June 26, 1284. The town of Hamelin, Germany is prepping dinner, probably bread, stew, and existential dread. But something's off. Every parent looks up and realizes the same thing. All the kids are gone. Not just a few, not a weird game of hide and seek. Gone. 130 kids. Ages for the 14 out poof. No TikTok, no tracking app, just medieval silence. And here's the creepy part. It's not a legend. Church windows were carved with this event. Town records were written by actual monks, not Reddit users in bathrobes. This event was so traumatic that it's one of the only medieval tragedies with an exact date. Remember, these are people who couldn't tell you what year it was, but June 26, 1284. That one stuck. Like, hey, remember when all the kids disappeared? Yeah. Let's not forget that Tuesday. And no, there were no rats in the original story. That whole rat infestation thing, made up centuries later, probably by a publicist trying to make it kid-friendly. The earliest versions talk about a strange man in colorful clothes, aka medieval Florida man, who showed up, played some kind of music, and led the kids away. No joke. Pied Piper walked in, played a tune, and stole an entire generation. Historians still debate what happened. One theory: the kids were recruited for a crusade because nothing says family-friendly like child soldiers. Another says they were trafficked to Eastern Europe to populate new settlements. In modern terms, kidnapping and forced colonization, yay history. The darkest theory? A mass drowning. Possibly a religious ritual gone wrong. You know, just your average medieval Tuesday sacrifice. And the impact was devastating. Hamelin's population tanked. People moved out. Entire families were like, yeah, we're good, thanks. Let's go somewhere the children don't vanish. To this day, Hamelin has a street where music is forbidden, bungalow Senstress, aka the street without drums, because apparently even in 2025, they still don't trust flutes. The Pied Piper wasn't about pest control, it was about a real mass disappearance and a town that never got its kids back. Sleeping Beauty, she didn't wake up from a kiss, she woke up a mom. Forget Disney's prince with perfect hair and suspicious boundary issues. The original Sleeping Beauty didn't get kissed awake. She got violated while unconscious, gave birth to twins, and only woke up when one baby sucked the poison splinter out of her finger. Romantic, right? The tale was called Sun, Moon, and Talia. Written by Italian poet Gian Battista Bostel in 1634, aka the same time powdered wigs were a personality trait. In Bostel's version, the king stumbles upon the sleeping girl, takes one look at her unresponsive body, and thinks, yep, that's my cue. So no kissing, just straight up sexual assault while she's unconscious. Sir, this is not a date, it's a crime scene. She stays asleep for 9 months, gives birth to twins, and only wakes up when one of them, while trying to nurse, sucks out the splinter that caused the enchanted sleep. And if you're wondering, why would someone write this? Well, medieval Europe had a disturbing trend. Women in catatonic states being taken advantage of. Hospitals, convents, even royal homes documented real cases of this happening. Unresponsive women were seen as opportunities, and if they got pregnant, people just blamed the Holy Spirit, or called it miracle babies. Seriously, some guy would say, God did it, and the crowd would go. Checks out, the most infamous case, a French noblewoman cared for in a convent. She fell into a coma, woke up pregnant, and after investigation, guess what? Multiple nuns and clergy have been abusing her. Yeah, the same people paid to protect her turned out to be her actual monsters. And it gets worse. In the story, when Sleeping Beauty wakes up, does the king go to jail? Of course not. He's already married and his actual wife finds out about the twins. Her response? She tries to cook the babies and feed them to her husband. Like some kind of Royal Gordon Ramsay episode from hell. Your Majesty, I've prepared baby au gratin for your treasonous appetite. Luckily, the cook swaps the kids out for lamb or something. Because we're already in therapy just thinking about this. But this was not fiction for entertainment. This was cultural therapy for trauma. In the real world, illegitimate kids, especially from rape, were seen as disposable. No legal protections, no happy endings. Just women discarded and punished for crimes committed against them. Later authors like Charles Perrault came along and said, Now it's a kiss. Let's clean this up a bit. So the rape, the babies, hidden, the cannibal queen, also toned down. Because nothing says bedtime story like courtroom horror rebranded as magical love. And when the brothers Grimm got their hands on it, they went full makeover. No sex, no babies, just a prince with good manners and a nice jawline. Everything's fine. Go to sleep, kids. But the original tale wasn't a story of romance. It was a warning that women, especially when vulnerable, were not safe. That powerful men often face no consequences. And that the world would rather rewrite their trauma than confront it. So no, she didn't wake up from true love's kiss. She woke up to find her body had been violated, her life hijacked. And the babies at her side, and the real prince, he wasn't charming, he was a felon with the crown. Hansel and Gretel, starvation, child abandonment, and cannibalism, yum! Between 1315 and 1322, Europe got a taste of something even worse than medieval politics, 7 straight years of famine. No food, no livestock, just cold winters, empty barns, and a whole lot of suffering. It was called the Great Famine. And spoiler alert, it was anything but great. Now, imagine you're a medieval parent with 6 kids, no grain, and winter coming. Do you? A. Let the whole family starve together. B. Sacrifice the youngest so the rest can survive. Sadly, a lot of families chose option B, and that's the real origin of Hansel and Gretel. Not cute breadcrumbs and candy houses, but systematic child abandonment. Court records, yes, actual legal documents, show cases where parents would walk their kids deep into the forest, tell them they were going foraging, then ditch them faster than your ex after seeing your bank account, and they'd leave the kids with a few crumbs of bread, or maybe a berry or two. Just enough for false hope. These weren't bad people. They were desperate, broke, and watching food prices go up 800%. This wasn't parenting. It was triage, and the part with the cannibal witch. Yeah, unfortunately, that one has roots in truth too. Historical records during famine years document people, actual adults, luring kids with food, only to kill and eat them. Yep, gingerbread houses weren't fantasy, they were red flags. Come inside, little ones, try the caramel shingles, don't mind the giant cauldron. In some parts of Germany, investigators later found what they called witch houses, isolated cabins filled with bones, cooking tools, and human remains. No broomsticks, no flying, just real horror. Cannibalism wasn't a metaphor. It was a menu item. Parents ate their own dead children. Strangers cooked orphan kids. This wasn't fantasy. This was survival during the worst food shortage Europe had ever seen. Even the famous breadcrumbs trail, that's real too. Medieval kids were taught to mark their path with stones or scraps, so they could find their way home if left behind, which says a lot about parenting expectations back then. Here's your snack. Here's your survival rock. Try not to get eaten. Love you. When the brothers Grimm collected Hansel and Gretel, Germany had been through centuries of famine and war. In the Grimm version, the parents barely flinch about abandoning their kids. What they recorded wasn't just a story, it was generational trauma with the candy wrapper. The scariest part, no guilt, no dramatic monologue. Just, we have no food, leave the children like they were throwing out expired milk. And archaeologists have found child-sized graves in European forests carbon dated to this exact famine period. Real kids who never made it out of the woods. These weren't fairy tale symbols, they were kids. Hansel and Gretel isn't about witches and breadcrumbs. It's about poverty, abandonment, and what people do when survival eats morality for breakfast. Snow White, the poison princess, and her child minor army. Let's rewind the fairy tale clock to 1533, Germany, castles, rich people doing rich people things. And in one of those castles lies a 16-year-old noble girl named Margarita von Waldeck. Beautiful, powerful, and suddenly, very dead. She didn't choke on an apple. She didn't fall into a magic sleep waiting for Prince I Have No Personality to kiss her. Nope. She was poisoned in real life over inheritance, family greed, and corporate child exploitation. So basically, succession with corsets. Margarita came from Syria's money. Her family owned mines in the Waldeck region, mines powered by child labor. These weren't 7 quirky dwarfs whistling while they worked. They were real kids, malnourished, deformed from labor, and dying by the dozen. Locals literally called them the little people because they were so stunted by starvation and toxic mine gas. Not Disney dwarfs. These were child workers in a death trap wearing rags and coughing up coal dust. And Margarita, she had opinions. She started questioning the ethics of all this, which, in a medieval noble household, is like bringing a vegan salad to a Texas BBQ. It doesn't go over well. She wanted reform. Her family, especially her loving stepmother, wanted her silenced. By silenced, we don't mean grounded. We mean systematically poisoned with heavy metals like arsenic and mercury. The royal physician's report at the time said she was sickly, pale, and drifting into long sleep-like states. Gee, sound familiar? Sleeping Beauty. But with a murder plot, centuries later, forensic tests on her hair revealed repeated poisoning over 6 weeks. That's not an accident. That's medieval slow-cooked homicide. Now let's talk about that magic mirror. Margarita, the stepmother, Countess Katharina, had an obsession with mirrors. The expensive Venetian kind. She spent more on her reflection than most towns spent on food. So yeah, mirror on the wall, probably wasn't magical, just narcissistic and unhinged. And when Margarita finally died, they put her on display in an open coffin for mourning, as was tradition. But something was off. Days after death, her body still looked like she was just sleeping. no decomposition, pale skin. The slow poisons had literally preserved her like some twisted taxidermy project. She didn't need a prince. She needed a lawyer, a food taster, and a lock on her bedroom door. The brothers Grimm collected the story of Snow White in this exact region 300 years later. Locals had turned a real royal murder into a cautionary fairy tale. Disney made it adorable. History made it terrifying. So, to recap, the dwarfs, real kids working to death in mines. The poison princess, real noblewoman trying to make change. The evil queen, real stepmother trying to keep the money. The happy ending, nowhere in sight. Fairy tales don't always lie, but they sure leave a lot of bodies out of the picture. Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf was real, and he ate people. France, 1764. Something is hunting people in the woods. And no, it's not a werewolf, it's worse. It's real, and it's racking up a kill count like it's gunning for a Netflix series. For 3 years, the Beast of Gavaudan, La Bête, terrorized south-central France. It didn't just bite people, it decapitated them. We're talking over 100 victims, many of them kids. And yet somehow this never made it into the bedtime version with the cute red hood. Eyewitnesses described it as a giant, reddish, wolf-like creature the size of a calf. Which begs the question, what kind of monster cow-sized wolf gets that jacked without hitting the gym? But here's the twist, this thing hunted with strategy. It didn't just pounce, it stalked its victims. Especially women and kids walking alone through the woods. Yep, just like that sweet little girl in the fairy tale with the basket of bread. And crippling danger awareness. And this isn't poetic metaphor. Folks, multiple real-life cases involved young girls carrying food to sick relatives. Sound familiar? Because it's literally Little Red Riding Hood's entire plotline. One girl, 19-year-old Marie-Jean Ballet, even fought the beast off with a spear. She was basically the medieval version of Buffy the Wolf Slayer. Her testimony matches the fairy tale almost line for line. Lone girl, forest path, basket of food, predator waiting. Only difference? No cartoon grandma, no cheerful moral at the end, just trauma. And the OG version of Little Red Riding Hood wasn't cute either. In Charles Perrault's 1697 version, the wolf doesn't just eat grandma, he tricks the girl into eating her own grandmother's flesh and drinking her blood before devouring her. Yep, sweet dreams, kids. There's no heroic woods man, no plot twist. Just Red becoming lunch after a nice helping of cannibal hors d'oeuvres. But here's what makes it all hit harder. Wolves were actually a massive problem in medieval Europe. Historical records are full of documented wolf attacks. We're talking packs dragging children off from villages, stalking farmers, terrorizing travelers. The big bad wolf wasn't fiction. It was a medieval Amber Alert with fur. And parents weren't telling the story for fun. And if a furry dude with big teeth asked where you're headed, run. It was a survival guide. Don't talk to strangers. Don't go into the woods alone. Little Red Riding Hood wasn't a fairy tale. It was the medieval version of a true crime reenactment, just with more baskets and fewer Dateline interviews. Bluebeard, the fairy tale that hit a real-life child killer. Remember Bluebeard? The creepy guy with the big castle, a room full of dead wives, and that one nosy bride who found the bodies and barely made it out alive. Yeah, turns out that wasn't some spooky bedtime story about the dangers of curiosity. It was based on a real nobleman in 15th century France who tortured and murdered over 140 children. Yeah, children. Welcome to the Middle Ages, rated R for Run. The man's name was Gilles de Rais, and by all accounts, he had it all. Money, looks, a winning smile. Oh, and a full-on murder dungeon in his castle. Talk about a red flag on Tinder. He was a war hero too, fought side by side with Joan of Arc. Which makes this even more twisted, because he went from saving France to barbecuing children in his fireplace. Yeah, literally. He burned the bodies to hide the evidence. And we're still calling this a fairy tale? Poor families would send their kids to work at his estate thinking, wow, our child is going to work for a fancy nobleman, and then boom, vanished. No letters, no wages, just crickets and regret. Now here's where it gets stomach-churning. This monster believed that sacrificing innocent children would give him supernatural powers and wealth. Like, dude, just start a pyramid scheme like a normal rich sociopath. The murders were so horrific that even medieval scribes refused to write down the full details. And these are the same people who thought flaying someone alive was a Tuesday. So, you know it had to be next-level nightmare fuel. He didn't work alone either. He had accomplices, people who helped him kidnap, torture, and kill. Basically a medieval version of Jeffrey Dahmer meets a cult-funded murder club. Except instead of a fridge, he had castle dungeons. So how did this tie into Bluebeard? Well, Gilles de Rais had multiple wives, and guess what? They all died, mysteriously. He let them have free reign at the castle, except for one room. You already know where this is going. At least 2 of his wives disobeyed and found his dirty little secrets. One fell down the stairs. One died of illness. And I say illness in quotes because medieval nobles had a habit of calling poisoning a bad night's sleep. The locked room trope in Bluebeard is basically a metaphor for his real-life crime scene. You can explore the mansion, but don't go into that one room with all the missing children's bones. Okay. Classic. Charles Perrault's version of the tale, the one most of us know, sanitized everything. He made it about wives, not children. Curiosity, not carnage. Disobedience, not death. And thus, Bluebeard became a cautionary tale for women instead of an actual expose on a homicidal aristocrat. Here's what makes it even worse. Gilles de Rais operated like this for over a decade. You know why. Because he was rich. That's it. He was protected by his title and his money just like every villain in a corporate scandal today. It wasn't until one of his flunkies was caught robbing a church, seriously, got tortured, and spilled the beans. The full investigation revealed dozens, possibly hundreds of missing kids. Over 800 families came forward. 800, the actual death toll, we'll never know. Poor rural families didn't always report missing children. It might have been double or triple that. So what was the real message of the Bluebeard fairy tale? Not don't be curious. Not wives should listen to their husbands. It was this: if a rich, charming man gives you everything quickly, he might be hiding a murder room behind that wine cellar. The stories we tell children weren't always meant to comfort them. They were designed to protect them from predators, starvation, strangers, and even their own families. Fairy tales aren't fantasy. They're history, disguised in a cloak of fiction. So next time you hear once upon a time, ask yourself, what really happened?